And there's a whole world out there that I wanted to learn about, being able to experience things that I think a lot of people want to experience in lifetimes. It's great to be the person which others can turn to and say, I know he's going to know the answer because he's a paramedic and EMT. We start seeing the field of EMS continue to expand. This is some cutting edge educational equipment within simulation education, augmented reality, a software that do not exist in a lot of EMS programs out there. You can put us in any location whatsoever, but we'll know how to treat a patient, assess a patient the same way every time. We are the Swiss Army knife of public health. When people are honest with each other and we're really talking about what's actually on our minds or in our hearts, and life moves a little bit easier. It was scary, but I can look back on it and go, wow, that was crazy, but I made it through it. A lot of my colleagues made it through it safely. Hopefully when I become old and I have grandkids, I would be able to tell a different story every time. That would put a smile to my face. I've been working in the New York City 911 EMS system since 2006. I started as an EMT, worked for that for about 3.5 years, became a paramedic around 2009. Throughout that whole time, it's been purely in the New York City 911 system. I did have some opportunities to work out in Long Island through one of the big health systems there, so I have a little experience outside the city, but my love is for New York City. On top of that, I have had the opportunity to work for a few paramedic and EMS programs. I was part of the starting faculty for one of the paramedic programs out in Brooklyn. And then I came here back in 2019 because I've heard great things about the BMCC program, and I really wanted to be part of a progressive program that's growing and pushing our field forward. I've also had the opportunity to work as an administrator, mainly as a training officer, so got to see both sides of teaching students as fresh EMTs and fresh medics, and then continuing educations for existing EMTs and existing paramedics. So my life has revolved around EMS education for quite some time now. This is a great stepping stone into healthcare and public health. It's a field that, if you truly embrace that you're there for people versus just the science, it makes the job a bit easier. I think a lot of students come in from high school not realizing what sort of opportunities you can have with EMS, or sometimes they come in with a very narrow view, thinking that EMS is only about the emergencies. But in reality, it's a field where you learn how to talk to people, how to calm them down, come into a chaotic situation and bring some stability in those situations. And that's what I love about BMCC, because we do not focus on just emergency care. We also focus on how do you assess a scene, how do you assess a patient, and then how do you deal with all those components all at the same time, and then come out with the best results for both the patient and yourself. What's great about this program here is we don't stick with just old methods, right? A lot of the programs I grew up attending were a bit paramilitary in structure, almost like a boot camp. You were told to do it and just do it, but not much explanation as to why we do it. And that's what I want to say is one of the greatest strengths about BMCC is we really delve into why. Why do we start an IV? Why do we give this medication? Why should we speak to a patient having a behavioral health emergency in certain ways? Having that why really helps educate our students and bring better practices out into the field. The thing about medicine, it always changes. Changed over close to 20 years I've been doing this now. So what stuff that I learned 20 years ago, some of that doesn't apply today. And, we start seeing the field of EMS continue to expand. And for any program to keep up with that expansion, you really need to delve into the base medicine, but also how can we keep improving that? And I think BMCC does that great through incredible instructors from all backgrounds. We have folks that work for the FDNY, folks that work for hospitals, critical care, and then on top of that, the equipment, that we have invested in. This is some cutting edge educational equipment within simulation education, augmented reality software that do not exist in a lot of EMS programs out there. You need a life outside of EMS. I fell into that myself where a lot of my friends were paramedics, EMTs, maybe even nurses and doctors. It starts to eat after you a while because it's almost like a negative feedback where we talk stress to stress to stress and you keep comparing who's more stressed out. Once you realize that at the end of the day, this is a job at times, right? And once you get into your car or get into the subway heading home, you need to shut that side of your brain off. When I respond to a critical call, my brain is racing. I'm thinking about what should I do? How do I do it? What steps need to come by? How should my partner be acting? And some of us get stuck in that. It's like a gas pedal that gets stuck down. But once my shift is over, I need to go home. I need to shut that off. I need to be able to walk into my house, embrace my family, embrace my friends, and truly be able to learn how to separate work from my personal life, get a hobby, read, play video games, do something that's just outside of EMS. And I think that's one of the greatest things to do. Another aspect of burnout, I think, is the false perception of the job. A lot of us look at our public safety comrades. You have the police and the fire department. We look at how they are sort of elevated within the public view, right? They're heroes, and they are. And sometimes we get frustrated because we don't feel that gratitude from the public at times. If you shift your mindset from, hey, we're emergency personnel saving lives, to we're public health providers that are, really going into these stressful situations for our patients. And we're trying to provide that bit of stability for them and showing that, hey, we're a compassionate person here to help you. And some of your patients can become frustrating and they can become a bit aggressive, but we should be the ones that are a bit better trained at not matching that aggression, not matching that stress, and try to bring that down. And that in itself can sort of eat away at you too. So understanding that balance of, hey, sometimes I need to talk this out, find somebody, a peer, a colleague, or even a specialist, a professional, and really talk about that stress that we experience on the job and lay it out in the table in front of you, organize your thoughts a little bit, and figure out how we can move forward and away from that. Definitely. I think this is a great field if you are not sure you want to get into healthcare or you have lived a life where you haven't stepped out of your shell and spoken to strangers or have dealt with stressful situations. This is a great way to have those fundamentals, those foundations. I always say at least the EMT portion is a great stepping stone into any direction, right? Ideally, we would love our EMTs to continue on to becoming paramedics and maybe critical care paramedics, flight medics, professions like that. But we have a lot of EMTs that end up in nursing, end up as physician's assistants, and even medical school. But they come into those sort of advanced level programs with a bit stronger than their classmates because they didn't spend their whole time just learning the sciences, which are extremely important. They also learn, how do you talk to someone? How do you approach a patient? And really try to explain to them, I'm here to help you, in an organized fashion, identify what's wrong with them, and then identify what's the best course of action, which hospital to take them to. In high school, I was very shy. I was very anxious. I didn't really know how to put myself out there. I was very quiet. And it took me working just 1 year in Brooklyn as an EMT to really flip that personality. It became a lot more outgoing. It became a lot more assertive. And I was fortunate enough to have really good partners that taught me how not to swing wildly the other direction where I was aggressive or way too outgoing, but to learn how to balance it out, learn how to switch from one situation to another. And I think this field is incredible for that, especially if the person really wants to get into emergency medicine or any type of medicine where they're going to be talking to a lot of different people, how do you speak to them? So what's great about this day and age is you have the internet. With the internet, you have a lot of great people out there putting out their own sort of lectures, journals, right? There are a lot of learning management systems out there that put out great videos, but also staying in touch with your local EMS programs like BMCC, right? The advantage of BMCC is they are part of the university system, the City University of New York. So a lot of the courses that we offer here, all evidence-based, this is current research, and we're always looking to offer continuing education courses here. We offer things under the National Association of EMTs, so we have pre-hospital trauma life support, PHTLS. We're looking to add advanced medical life support. And these are all courses that someone can take when they've already become an EMT, already become a paramedic, but now they want to know how to do it a bit better or how to sharpen their skills a little bit more. And that's a great relationship to establish is with your local schools and see what they offer. And then if you don't have time to do that, the internet's always there with some great platforms out there to learn more. Being a father and a husband, yeah, I know it sounds cheesy and it sounds weird, but it's something that, I knew young when I was a kid, I would love to be able to have a family and, have a family that grows. And I've been fortunate enough to have a wife that I love dearly. She's incredible. She's supportive. She supports my career choices and my career path. And then we have a beautiful boy together who, I'm having a lot of fun raising. So that's become sort of my true life now, and everything else is sort of secondary. I really enjoy that aspect of my life. When I was a bit younger, I used to be into more of the active lifestyle, martial arts, climbing, hiking, things like that. I've slowed down a bit, but I would love to get back into that once I do better with my time. I try not to have this I'm a drill sergeant and you're my soldiers mentality. I want to have a two-way conversation. If I make a mistake or I do not understand something, I do my best to be honest about that. If they ask me a question I'm not sure about, I always tell them, hey, you know what? I do not know the answer to that, but I'm going to look it up. If you don't mind, can you look it up too? And make sure let's bring it up again. And this time I'll have an answer for you. That's what I really want to sort of stress is that when people are honest with each other and we're really talking about what's actually on our minds or in our hearts, I find life moves a little bit easier. When people do not communicate, they hide, their emotions are sort of revealed through their actions. That creates distress, that creates anxiety and angst. And I don't want that for my students. I want my students to be honest with me. I had a rough life as an immigrant, coming into this country. So I do relate to a lot of my students that are in the same position, but there are things that my students are going through that I've never gone through in my life, and I want a better understanding of that. And how can I help and support you? We've had students in the past that have had housing situations or have had family situations where they're supporting their whole family. They're the ones that are earning that paycheck, and at the same time they're coming to school. Unfortunately, I was never in that situation, so I learned from them. What are the best resources we can offer these students? And I fortunately work for a public university system that understands that about our students, and we look to offer those resources to make their lives a little easier as they're trying to balance supporting a family and at the same time increasing their education so they can better their career opportunities. There's this old school culture. I don't know if it's unique to New York City EMS. I'm sure it's out there in EMS also, but the saltiness, right? They believe the more experienced you are, the angrier and crankier you are. And that rubs me the wrong way. The first EMS agency I worked for was Long Island College Hospital, which was a very small hospital in Brooklyn, only ran 4 units. And what I loved about that is we were like a family. It was such a small agency that we all knew each other, every single one of us, and we used to hang out with each other outside of work. We went camping together. We would talk to each other. And originally, like I used to see that with some of the paramedics and EMTs, that bit of saltiness and complaining about this and that. But I was fortunate enough to have a partner who had been an EMT at that time for about 20, 30 years. He was one of our most senior EMTs at the time. And I think the best way I can describe him was he was a bit of a hippie, right? He didn't let this stuff stress him out. He was one of the first ones to teach me, when you leave work, right? He was the one that brought me out camping. He introduced me to his family and treated me like a son. But when we were at work, if someone raised their voice, he never raised his voice. He would keep it even, keep it tone. If he needed to take a pause and detach from the situation, he would. And I picked up a lot of that mannerisms. So, what I would say to any student entering this field, I understand for some students, all they have maybe is this idea of respect, that they must be respected, which is true. All humans should be respected. But at times when humans become emotional or angry, sometimes that respect is forgotten about. But we have to be the bigger person in those situations, and we have to take some of those reflexive emotions that we have and take a pause on it for a second and realize, you know what? I'm in a stressful situation right now. My patient's in a stressful situation. Nothing's going to improve with both of us being angry, both of us yelling at each other. I need to stop my brain for a sec, pause, come back. And if I see my partner is also sort of acting up and getting agitated, help them calm down, pause, and let's reset. Let's try this again. And I think that's one of the best things a student can learn is sometimes you have to step outside of your own brain, look at the situation as a whole, and figure out a better way we can approach this without anyone getting hurt emotionally or physically. I play Dungeons and Dragons. People that truly know me, I don't come off as a Dungeons and Dragons type of guy. And it was surprisingly a paramedic instructor here at BMCC that got me into the game. I suddenly found out I really enjoy, Wizards and Dragons. I got into it in my late 30s, so that's definitely a bit unique. I think we're slowly accepting, at least here in New York City, that we are not purely an emergency service. One of the big health systems that I work for, they're really pushing the idea of telehealth medicine in the field. Because what we do, at least again, speaking in the New York City setting, a lot of our patients are not emergent in the sense that they need an ER doctor right now or they need to go into surgery right now. Sometimes you just need to talk to someone. They don't have a primary physician in their neighborhood. They're unable to get in contact with a lower acuity doctor. So, in their mind, the only choice they have is an emergency room or an ambulance. What I appreciate, which New York City is doing in partnership with FDNY and the health systems, is we're trying to give our EMTs mainly the power to be able to assess a patient, identify that they're low acuity, they need a prescription refill, their blood pressure is a little high, but not something that we would think is super dangerous. Or it could be someone that's having a minor asthma attack, nothing that needs, high level medications, just a nebulizer treatment, and that's it. Now, do we have to drag them all to the emergency room, which are unfortunately in this city are crowded, short staffed, not in the greatest of conditions? No, not all of them need that. So we can teach our students now, how do you identify a patient that's low acuity, does not need an emergency room? What can we do for them here in their home? And then let's connect them with a physician or a physician's assistant and have a three-way conversation. Hey, these are the findings that I've found about this patient. This is what I believe is going on. The physician talks to the patient also. We come up with a treatment plan for that patient together as a group, and then we can find a way for that patient not to have to go to the hospital. So, what I would love to see is EMS sort of lead that completely. We are known as pre hospital clinicians, where we're used to operating in dynamic environments, in apartment buildings, down to subway stations, into all the way into the middle of Central Park. You can put us in any location whatsoever, but we'll know how to treat a patient, assess a patient the same way every time. And I think that's the strength of EMS, is being able to work in these sort of strange, unusual environments that's not a hospital or an urgent care center or a doctor's office, but we'll be able to treat, stabilize, and then consult with the physician and find what we can do best for that patient. BMCC just recently has started offering critical care medicine courses, right? So we can now have paramedics that were only 911 paramedics now learn how to become critical care paramedics. These paramedics now would be able to do critical care transfers from a hospital without, great capabilities, take an unstable patient from there and then bring them to a hospital that does have the capabilities to handle them. But now that medic is responsible to make sure that patient's stable from that small hospital all the way to the bigger one throughout that whole trip. So we can teach these paramedics to read lab values, understand what's going on with this patient. If that patient's dependent on a ventilator, these paramedics know how to operate that ventilator, how to adjust it and fix it to the patient's needs, how to monitor multiple drugs that might be hanging for that patient. There's a device and process called ECMO, which is a machine that functions as a heart and lung for a patient that might need a heart transplant or has suffered a critical issue where they're dependent on that machine. Well, we now have paramedics working right next to the doctors in the back of an ambulance, operating that machine, making sure everything goes well, and do their best to get that patient to safely to the hospital. And BMCC has invested in, the experts to teach these sort of things, the equipment needed to do that. And I think one of the best things we're doing here is we're not just lecturing and having our students practice on plastic mannequins. We're really moving into a simulation scenario based sort of instruction. So that way, when an EMT or a paramedic student leaves our program, it's an easier transition for them to get into the field because they've been doing the hands-on portions as if they were functioning in a real-world environment. That's something I didn't have going on in my programs when I was younger. A lot of it was just verbal cues. We would talk about cases, but here we're trying to link what did you learn, and now let's do it hands-on and bring it all together. And I think the MCC is one of the best programs that is really pushing that forward. Definitely. I learned that the hard way. When I worked at another EMS program, it was my first job outside of the street, right? I had worked as a 911 paramedic for a few years by then. That's all I really knew. And that's when I realized that in the real, when I say the real world, the world outside of EMS, to continue to advance and to move up a ladder, you need to have that piece of paper, that degree. But there's this national conversation about, oh, college is a waste of time, too much money. But what people are not understanding is it's not just the college course content and information that's important for that degree, right? It's, can you prove that you can meet a deadline? Can you prove that you can think outside of the medical space? That truly a good provider is not one with a single track mind where all they understand is medicine. They understand a little bit of humanities, they understand a little bit of history, they understand a little bit of math and physics and chemistry. All that comes together to make a well-rounded person. But if you really want to truly advance in this world and, really advance your career, you do need that degree behind you. And especially in this field, right? We always look at nursing. Nursing started off as, an associate's degree or a certification, and it still exists in that some form. But we're looking at the magnet hospitals now, and quite a few of them will require their nurses to have a bachelor's coming in, right? They encourage their nurses to get masters and to get doctorates as nurse practitioners. So this is a field that we've watched grow quickly, but we are not doing the same thing. And we need to, because if for us to truly say that the pre-hospital space is ours, we need to show that we can handle everything from the hands-on provider level all the way to the administrative and planning levels. But to be able to accomplish that, we got to show that we can survive in the academic space also. So I am 100% supporter of at least an associate's degrees for paramedics, and I'd love to see down the line for a bachelor's to become a standard. For EMT paramedic, my wife pointed out to me, it's how we handle stress. So I can be extremely stressed in my mind, but you should not be able to see that physically about me in the middle of a call. I want to be that point of stability. And I think that's what truly makes an EMT paramedic great is that no matter how stressful a situation can get, we can learn to keep ourselves at an even space so that others around us can see that they also can come down. There are times when I've been with friends that are not paramedics and not EMTs, and something silly, let's say someone spilled a glass of water on the table, right? Everyone jumps up, starts screaming, "Oh my God, get napkins, whatnot." But, there are a lot of times I find myself just calmly picking up the glass. I have a napkin available right next to me, quickly get that, put it down. I can act without having to take a pause and, freak out. And I think that's one thing that is a great skill to have, especially in this world and in this city too, which is a stressful city. The city has a lot of energy to it. It's great to be the person which others can turn to and say, you know what, I know he's going to know the answer because he's a paramedic and EMT. We were on vacation once out by the Jersey Shore, and I heard my sister-in-law yelling from the street, "Hey, somebody get Khalid." And people came running over to me and they're like, "Oh, a woman has just fallen in the middle of the street and she had, cut her head, a laceration. She was bleeding heavily." And I got there and people were panicking. They were yelling. She was an elderly woman, but I calmly grabbed the beach towel. I calmly put it to the side of her head. I realized we were in the middle of the street. We need to get out of the middle of the street. I calmly told everyone to help me pick her up. We got her off the street. I was talking to her the whole time. And I was just trying to bring that stress level down. But all that was due to my training and due to the great people that led me, including programs like this. I hate to use the word code switching, but learning how to adapt differently to different patients. There are some patients that become a bit more intimidated when you sound very cold, professional, calculated. And if that's the way you sound with every single patient, some of those patients won't warm up to you. The advantage I have is I'm a South Asian immigrant, so I'm part of the South Asian community. My wife is Jewish, so I've learned, things about the Jewish community. I live in New York City, which has, 800 plus languages, cultures from all over the world. And you realize that respect is different in different cultures. So learning how to switch from one type of speech or one type of action from one patient to another, that's a strange skill to have. It's a skill that I think I picked up pretty well. How I speak to my colleagues is not how I speak to my family members. How I speak to my friends is not how I speak to my patients. But learning to adapt from one situation to another can really bring sort of ease and comfort to a patient. And I think that's an interesting skill that I picked up through EMS, just being exposed to all the different patient populations and to colleagues, other EMTs and paramedics that have come from all types of different backgrounds. I learned a lot from them too. I'm not gonna lie to you. Someone showed me a badge. I thought it was very shiny, and I wanted one. But the truth of the matter is, my father's a physician. Initially, he wanted me to follow that path. I was a little bit lost in college. I didn't feel like I wanted to follow the medical school path, so I wasn't sure what to do with myself. Randomly, I decided to start going into government and politics. I started learning about that, but that healthcare itch sort of bothered me. So I found a local City University in New York program to me that was offering EMT school at night. So I attended that. It was my first ride along that really showed me, wow, I really want to do this job. And it was just being able to talk to people, right? I was coming out of my shell. I was realizing there's a whole world out there outside of college and outside of my own family that I wanted to learn about. So that's what drew me to this field was being able to experience things that I think a lot of people don't experience in lifetimes. I've delivered babies in the back of a taxi cab, and I'm pretty sure a good chunk of people have not done that before. So I feel content that, hopefully when I become old and I have grandkids, that I would be able to tell a different story every time because I've done so much within this field, both through education and both through just working as a paramedic provider, where I have a lifetime of stories in my head that would put a smile to my face and really make me feel accomplished. Being outgoing. There's a lot of us that we second guess what we want to say or do in our heads. And, I was like that, especially with battling anxiety was one of my big problems. I would constantly be questioning myself in my head, what are they thinking about you? Or, are you seeing the right thing? Are you wearing the right clothes? I stopped caring about that. And more in the sense of, I don't let it cripple me anymore, right? I still worry about my patient's perception of me because I care about them. So it became an issue of stop worrying about myself, worry about how we can make everyone calm, how we can make everyone stable. And that's one thing that really helped EMS really push forward, was pulling me out of my shell and making me a more outgoing person. Earning my master's, that was pretty cool, to have my master's in emergency management, again through the City University of New York. Went through one of their colleges there. It was a career path I was thinking about originally, when I was looking to see how I can transition out of the street. I had a great opportunity to be selected as part of the John D. Solomon Fellowship of New York City. It's a fellowship given to only 10 people to do time with New York City Emergency Management and a few other the big agencies. And what was interesting was my first half of the year, I was mainly doing training and exercises, which is paired up beautifully with my education background. I got to work under a great mentor, Robert Cohen, down at New York City Emergency Management, learned a lot from these wonderful people, learned a lot about the different city agencies here in New York. But then COVID hit. So within the second half of my fellowship, I got to watch how a citywide activation actually works. How do you deal with a pandemic? One of the craziest points of my life is dealing with a pandemic from an administrative level. I still was working out of another place where I would deal with one on one with patients. So I was suiting up, I was wearing the respirators and things like that. But now, how do you do it from a strategic point? How do you handle a pandemic when you have about 200, 300 EMTs and paramedics that work under you? How do you ensure their safety? How do you ensure they have the resources? How do you make sure you don't bring that home and then, accidentally expose your loved ones to it? All of this was new to us. All of this was stressful to us. But the training I had through emergency management, through being a paramedic and EMT, made it slightly easier to deal with it. It was scary, but it was something that I can look back on and go, wow, that was crazy, but I made it through it. A lot of my colleagues made it through it safely, and it was all thanks to the training we've received to be able to deal with that. I think that's where I love using the term that we are the Swiss Army knife of public health, because we weren't just doing 911. The hospitals had become overwhelmed, so there was special executive orders that came out allowing paramedics and EMTs to function within a hospital setting. So we had EMTs and paramedics assisting with triage. We had EMTs and paramedics assisting within the emergency room itself. So it really showed that you can take that paramedic, you can take that EMT, pull them off an ambulance, and then put them somewhere else where they can utilize their skills to really aid other professions. One of the proudest moments I had was during the vaccination drive when, the COVID vaccine was finally rolling out, and New York City was offering it to all the different patient populations, and they were opening up big centers to accommodate all these people that need the vaccines. They relied a lot on EMTs and paramedics to staff those centers. So I had the opportunity to work down at City College and a few places down in the village. And it was interesting just sitting in a booth with a bunch of other medical professionals, nurses, doctors, EMTs, and paramedics, and then having these patients come in one by one. Some of them with relief on their face, saying, finally, there's a vaccine here, and being able to sort of demonstrate how quick we were, because I can easily say the paramedics and the EMTs were the quickest ones with the vaccinations, because we'd calmly tell them, all right, let's double check your information. Do you understand the risks? Have a quick conversation. One, two, three, give that vaccination and be like, great, you're done. You can go ahead and move on. And you'd look at our other sort of medical colleagues in other professions, and they were, a bit slower on the uptake. They weren't used to operating at the speed we did. That was an interesting learning experience where you can take an EMT and a paramedic out of the 911 system and still find a great place to put them and really flourish. The legacy I hope to leave behind is how I felt about my paramedic and EMT instructors. I always think of them fondly. Donald Cardone, he was my EMT instructor. He taught my EMT course. He was my paramedic skills instructor. And then he happened to become one of my directors at an EMS agency I worked for. And I learned a lot from him, from the fundamentals to how to be a good administrator. I want somebody to be able to say, hey, I saw how Khalid taught people. I saw how Khalid managed people, and I want to do that too. I want to be like that, and that would be a legacy. I don't need my name on a building. I don't need an ambulance named after me. I just want someone to have a positive memory of me and say, "Hey, I saw Khalid talk to a patient that way. Man, you know what? I want to talk like that too." That's enough. That's all I need. And then other than that, I want my son to grow up healthy, and that's a bigger legacy to me is just to make sure my family keeps growing and they stay safe and healthy.